A mother's desperate plea, an outlaw's impossible choice, when Caroline begs the stranger not to take her daughter to pay their debt. He raises his gun, and everything changes. Some debts can't be paid in gold, and some choices haunt a man forever, but mercy has a price neither of them expected. Caroline's hands shook as she clutched the doorframe, her knuckles white against the splintered wood. The man on her porch wasn't what she'd expected. Outlaws were supposed to look like devils, weren't they? But this one just looked tired. Dust caked his dark coat, and his hat shadowed a face carved lean by years of hard living. His gun hung at his hip, grip worn smooth from use, and his eyes held something she couldn't quite name. Not cruelty. Maybe worse, indifference. "Mrs. Garrett," he said, voice low and flat. "Your husband owes Mr. Dalton $300. I'm here to collect." Caroline's breath hitched. She'd known this day would come ever since Thomas rode into town 3 months ago, wild-eyed and full of promises about the cattle deal that would save their farm. The cattle never came. The money disappeared. And Thomas, God help her, Thomas had run 2 weeks ago, leaving nothing but a note that said "I'm sorry" and debts that would bury them all. "We don't have it," Caroline said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "We don't have anything." The outlaw, she'd heard someone in town call him Reese, just Reese, like a man with only half a name, stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, but deliberate. "Dalton figured as much. That's why he sent me with terms." Caroline's stomach turned. "What terms?" Reese pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket and held it out. His hand was steady, but she noticed the dirt under his nails, the old scar across his knuckles. Working hands. Killer's hands. She took the paper with trembling fingers and unfolded it, though she could barely focus on the words. When she finally made sense of them, the world tilted sideways. "No," she whispered. Then louder, stronger, "No, absolutely not." "It's business, ma'am," Reese said, but something in his tone had shifted. "Girl's old enough to work. Dalton runs a respectable house in Silver Fork. She'd be fed, clothed, taught manners, and—" "She's 14 years old," Caroline's voice cracked like a whip. Behind her, in the shadows of their small cabin, she heard Emma's soft gasp. Her daughter had been listening. Of course she had. "You want to take my child to an auction house, to be sold like livestock?" Reese's jaw tightened. "Dalton's offering to clear your debt in full. It's more mercy than most would get." Mercy? Caroline felt something hot and furious rise in her chest, something that pushed past fear and desperation into pure maternal rage. She stepped out onto the porch, forcing Reese to back up a step. "You call stealing a child mercy? What kind of devil are you?" For just a moment something flickered across Reese's face. Pain, maybe, or memory, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by that same careful blankness. The kind that follows orders. "You've got until sundown to decide. I'll be back." "Wait," Caroline grabbed his arm without thinking. He froze, looking down at her hand like it was a snake that might strike. She let go immediately but didn't back down. "Please, please don't do this. She's all I have left. Her father's gone, our farm is dying, but Emma, she's good and sweet, and she deserves more than being sold to pay for her father's mistakes." Reese looked at her for a long moment. Really looked, like he was seeing past the threadbare dress and desperate eyes to something deeper. "Life ain't about deserving, Mrs. Garrett. It's about surviving." "Then help us survive another way," Caroline begged. "There has to be something else, anything else." "There isn't." Reese turned to leave, but Caroline's next words stopped him cold. "What if it was your daughter?" His whole body went rigid. When he turned back, his face was no longer blank. It was carved from stone and grief. "Don't." "What if someone came to your door?" Caroline pressed, knowing she was playing with fire but unable to stop, "and told you they were taking your child to pay a debt. What would you do?" Reese's hand drifted toward his gun, not as a threat but as something to hold onto. "I'd kill them," he said quietly. "But I don't have a daughter, Mrs. Garrett, and you don't have a gun, so we're back where we started." He walked away then, boots heavy on the dry earth, leaving Caroline trembling on the porch. Behind her, Emma emerged from the cabin. Her daughter was small for 14, with Thomas's dark hair and Caroline's green eyes, and right now she looked younger than ever, a child trying to be brave. "Mama," Emma's voice was barely a whisper, "what are we going to do?" Caroline pulled her daughter into her arms, breathing in the scent of soap and hay and innocence that might not survive the week. "I don't know, baby, but I won't let them take you. I swear to God I won't." Inside the cabin, Caroline paced while Emma sat at their small table, hands folded like she was praying. Maybe she was. Caroline had stopped praying when Thomas left. It seemed pointless to ask God for help when he'd already made it clear they were on their own. But now, watching her daughter's pale face, she wanted to believe in something. Anything. "There's got to be someone in town who'd help," Emma said softly. "What about Sheriff Morrison?" Caroline shook her head. "Morrison's in Dalton's pocket. Everyone knows it. And even if he wasn't, the debt's legal. Thomas signed papers." She wanted to scream at the memory of her husband's stupidity, his weakness, but rage wouldn't save Emma now. She needed to think. "We could run," Emma suggested, but her voice held no hope. "Leave tonight, head north." "With what?" Caroline gestured at their bare cabin. "We've got one horse, barely any food, and winter's coming. We wouldn't make it 50 miles before we froze or starved." She stopped pacing and looked at her daughter. Really looked. When had Emma grown so tall? When had the softness of childhood started giving way to the angles of a young woman? Time had slipped through Caroline's fingers like sand, and now someone wanted to steal what little remained. "Mama, I could go." Emma's words hit like a physical blow. "If it means you keep the farm, if it means you're safe." "Stop." Caroline crossed to her daughter and gripped her shoulders. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself for a piece of dirt and a falling down cabin. You're worth more than any of this." "But you heard him," Emma said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Dalton runs a respectable house. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I could." "No," Caroline's voice was iron. "No respectable house buys children, Emma. Whatever Dalton's calling it, whatever pretty words that man used, it's wrong. And I won't allow it." They sat together in silence, Caroline's arm around Emma's shoulders, both of them watching the sun crawl across the floor through their single grimy window. The light would be gone soon. Reese would come back. And Caroline still had no plan, no miracle, no way out. The sun was touching the horizon when Emma spoke again. "What was he like, the outlaw?" Caroline frowned. "Why?" "I don't know, he just didn't sound like a monster, he sounded sad." "Sad men can still do monstrous things," Caroline said, but Emma's words lingered. She'd seen it too, that flicker of something human in Reese's eyes when she'd asked about his daughter. It had been real, brief but real, which meant maybe, just maybe, there was still something in him worth appealing to. It was a desperate thought, a foolish thought, but desperation and foolishness were all Caroline had left. "Stay inside," she told Emma, standing abruptly. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Mama, what are you doing?" "Something stupid," Caroline admitted, "but I have to try." She found Reese at the edge of town, sitting on a fence rail outside the old livery stable. His horse, a big gray gelding, grazed nearby, and Reese himself was rolling a cigarette with slow, practiced movements. He looked up when Caroline approached, surprise flickering across his face before settling back into that careful neutrality. "Mrs. Garrett," he said, "sundown's not for another hour." "I know." Caroline stopped a few feet away, hands clenched at her sides. "I came to talk." "Already talked?" "No," she said firmly. "You delivered a message. That's not the same thing." When he didn't immediately dismiss her, she pressed on. "You said you don't have a daughter, but you had someone once, didn't you? Someone who made you understand what I'm feeling right now." Reese's hand stilled on the cigarette. "That's none of your business." "You're right," Caroline agreed. "But you're about to take my daughter, so I'm making it my business. Who was she? Your daughter, your sister." Stop. Your wife, Caroline watched his face carefully. There, a tightening around his eyes, a muscle jumping in his jaw. It was your wife. Reese lit the cigarette with sharp, angry movements. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong, Caroline challenged. Tell me you've never loved anyone enough to understand why I'd rather die than watch my child be sold. Tell me you're just following orders and nothing I say matters because you're too much of a coward to. Reese was off the fence and in front of her before she could finish, close enough that she could smell tobacco and leather and something wilder underneath. His eyes blazed with an emotion she couldn't name, but his voice came out quiet. Dangerous. Careful, Mrs. Garrett. You're pushing at things that'll push back. Caroline's heart hammered, but she didn't retreat. So push back, shoot me, beat me. Do whatever men like you do to women who don't obey, but you're still not taking Emma. They stood there in the dying light, neither moving, neither speaking. Then Reese stepped back and took a long drag from his cigarette, looking anywhere but at Caroline. Her name was Sarah, he said finally, so quietly she almost missed it. My wife. She died 6 years ago, giving birth to a daughter who lived 3 days. I buried them together in a plot outside Santa Fe that I'll never see again because I can't. He stopped, jaw working. I can't stand to look at that ground and know everything I loved is under it. Caroline's anger drained away, replaced by a different kind of ache. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back, Reese said, and it doesn't change what I have to do here. But it could, Caroline insisted. You could walk away. Tell Dalton I ran, tell him the debt's uncollectible, tell him anything. You have that power. Reese laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. You think I have power? Lady, I'm owned just as sure as you are. Dalton holds my debts too, different kind maybe, but just as real. I don't do this job, he'll make sure I never work again, or worse. He flicked ash from the cigarette. In this world, Mrs. Garrett, there's only 2 kinds of people, those who survive and those who don't. I chose to survive. And my daughter, what about her survival? She'll survive too, Reese said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Dalton's place isn't as bad as you think. She'll have food, shelter. She'll be property, Caroline cut in. She'll be taught to smile when men look at her like meat. She'll lose every piece of herself until she can't remember who she was before. And you know it. You know exactly what you're condemning her to, and you're doing it anyway because you're too broken to care. Reese's hand moved to his gun, not drawing it, just resting there. Time's up, Mrs. Garrett. Get your daughter ready. We leave in an hour. No, Caroline planted her feet. You want Emma, you'll have to go through me. Don't be stupid, you can't. Can't what? Can't stop you. Caroline felt something wild and reckless take hold. You're right, but I can make you shoot a woman in cold blood to get what you want. I can make you look at Emma and see your own daughter's ghost. I can make you remember that you were human once before you became this. Reese's face had gone pale. His hand trembled on the gun grip. Move. Make me. For one terrible, suspended moment, Caroline thought he might actually do it. His eyes had gone dark and distant, like a man drowning in memories he couldn't escape. Then slowly he lifted his hand away from the gun, drew in a shaking breath, and when he spoke his voice was raw. You don't understand what you're asking. If I don't bring the girl, Dalton will send someone else. Someone worse. At least with me she'd get there safe. Safe, Caroline repeated hollowly. You keep using that word like it means something. It means alive, Reese shot back. It means not beaten or worse on the road because some other bastard decided to have his fun first. You think I'm the monster. I'm the best chance your daughter has. The words hung between them, terrible in their honesty. And Caroline realized with crushing weight that he might actually believe it, that in his broken, twisted way, Reese thought he was showing mercy. That delivering Emma himself was somehow noble. Please, she whispered, all her fire burning down to ash. Please don't take her, I'll work. I'll do anything, just, please. Reese closed his eyes. 1 hour, Mrs. Garrett, that's all I can give you. He walked away into the gathering dark. leaving Caroline alone with the weight of an impossible choice and the sound of her own heart breaking. Caroline walked back to the cabin with lead in her legs and no hope in her heart. The sky had gone purple dark, stars beginning to prick through like distant witnesses to her failure. She'd gambled everything on reaching something human inside Reese, and she'd lost. Maybe there was nothing left inside him to reach. Maybe 6 years of grief had carved out everything soft and left only the shell of a man who followed orders because it was easier than remembering how to feel. Emma stood when Caroline entered, eyes wide and searching. "Mama." Caroline couldn't speak. She pulled her daughter close and held on like Emma might disappear if she loosened her grip even slightly. They stood that way for a long time, neither crying, both too numb for tears. The clock on the mantel, one of the few things Thomas hadn't sold or lost, ticked away the minutes with cruel precision. "I need you to listen to me," Caroline said finally, pulling back to look at Emma's face. "Whatever happens next, whatever they tell you or try to make you believe, you remember who you are. You're Emma Rose Garrett. You're smart and brave and good, and nobody can take that from you unless you let them." "Mama, stop," Emma whispered. "You're talking like I'm already gone." "I'm talking like a mother who needs her daughter to survive," Caroline said fiercely. "Promise me. Promise you'll fight to stay yourself." Emma's lip trembled, but she nodded. "I promise." A knock came at the door, heavier this time, more final. Caroline's whole body tensed, but before she could move, Emma stepped forward. "I'll get it." "Emma, no." But her daughter had already pulled open the door. Reese stood on the threshold, hat in hand, looking somehow smaller than before. He'd always been tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who took up space just by existing. Now he seemed diminished, like he was trying to fold in on himself and disappear. "Time to go," he said quietly. Emma lifted her chin, 14 years old and trying so hard to be brave. "I'm ready." "No, you're not," Reese said, and there was something strange in his voice. "Nobody's ever ready for this." He stepped inside without invitation, his gaze sweeping the cabin, the bare walls, the cold stove, the table with 2 chairs where a family of 3 should have sat. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. Finally, he reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked softly with the weight of coins. "This is $50, Reese said, holding it out to Caroline. "It's what I was paid to bring the girl to Dalton. Take it. Buy supplies, fix your roof before winter, whatever you need." Caroline stared at the pouch like it was a snake. "I don't want your blood money." "It's not blood money if nobody bleeds," Reese said. "Just take it." "Why?" Emma asked, before Caroline could refuse again. "Why would you give us that?" Reese looked at Emma properly for the first time, really looked at her. Caroline saw his throat work, saw the way his hand tightened on the pouch. "Because Sarah would have done the same thing you're doing," he said hoarsely. "She would have stood in front of our daughter with nothing but love and fury, and she would have dared the whole damn world to get past her. I couldn't save them, but maybe." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter, take the money." "It does matter," Caroline said, understanding dawning cold and bright. "You're not taking Emma." "No," Reese agreed, "I'm not." Emma made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Caroline felt her knees go weak with relief so intense it was almost painful, but Reese held up a hand, cutting off any celebration. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice dropping low and urgent. "Dalton will know I didn't collect. He'll send someone else, probably worse than me, and they'll be here in 2, maybe 3 days. You need to be gone before then, far gone." "Where would we go?" Caroline asked. "We don't have family, we don't." "North," Reese interrupted. "There's a town called Redemption Ridge, about 80 miles up past the border. It's small, rough, but they don't ask questions, and Dalton's reach doesn't extend that far. You could start over." 80 miles, Caroline repeated numbly, "with 1 horse and winter coming." "You got a better option." She didn't, they both knew it. Caroline looked at Emma, then back at Reese. "Why are you helping us?" Reese was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "Because I'm tired of being the man who doesn't," he said finally. "And because maybe if I save your daughter somewhere in whatever comes after, Sarah will know I tried, that I wasn't always." He stopped, swallowed hard. "Pack light, take food and blankets, leave everything else." He turned to go, but Emma caught his sleeve. "What about you? If Dalton finds out you let us go?" "That's my problem, not yours," Reese said, but his face had gone carefully blank again. "Now move. Every minute you waste is a minute closer to them catching up." He left quickly, pulling the door shut behind him. Caroline stood frozen for a heartbeat, then sprang into action. "Emma, grab the blankets, all of them. I'll get what food we have." They worked in frantic silence, stuffing supplies into worn saddlebags and a canvas pack. Caroline's hands shook as she wrapped their last loaf of bread, as she filled their canteen from the water barrel, as she looked around the cabin one final time. This place had been her home for 5 years. She'd laughed here, cried here, raised her daughter here. And now she was leaving it behind like it meant nothing. But Emma meant everything. And if running into the unknown was the price of keeping her daughter safe, Caroline would pay it without hesitation. They led their horse, a gentle old mare named Dove, out into the night. The moon had risen, casting everything in silver and shadow. Caroline was just about to mount up when she heard footsteps. She spun, hand going to the knife at her belt, but it was only Reese. He led his gray gelding forward, and behind the gelding was a second horse, a sturdy-looking bay with a white star on its forehead. "You'll never make it on one horse," Reese said. "Take mine." "We can't," Caroline started, but Reese was already transferring supplies to the bay's saddle. "Gray's faster than he looks," Reese continued like she hadn't spoken. "Bay's got endurance. Between the two of them, you'll make decent time." He handed Caroline a rolled map. "This'll get you to Redemption Ridge. Stay off the main roads. There's a creek about 20 miles north. Follow it west for 5 miles, then cut back north. Keeps you clear of Dalton's usual routes." Emma climbed onto Dove with practiced ease, but Caroline hesitated, map clutched in her hands. "You're giving us your horse. How will you?" "I'll manage," Reese said shortly. "Always do." "Mr. Reese," Emma said softly, "thank you." He looked up at her, and in the moonlight Caroline saw something crack in his careful mask. "Don't thank me yet, girl. You got a hard road ahead, but—" He paused, then reached into his coat and pulled out something small and metallic, a pocket watch, silver and worn smooth with age. "This was Sarah's. I want you to have it." "I can't take this," Emma protested. "You can," Reese said firmly. "It'll sell for good money if you get desperate, and if you don't need to sell it—" He swallowed hard. "Then maybe you'll wind it sometimes and remember that somebody fought for you to stay free. That matters. It has to matter." Emma took the watch with trembling hands, closing her fingers around it like a promise. Caroline mounted the bay, settling into the unfamiliar saddle. From horseback, she looked down at Reese, this man who'd come to destroy them and instead had given them everything. "What will you tell Dalton?" she asked. Reese's smile was bitter. "The truth, that you ran and I couldn't find you. He won't believe it, but it's the truth all the same." "He'll hurt you." "Probably." Reese stepped back, hand resting on his gun out of habit. "But I've been hurt before. I'll survive. Question is, will you? Redemption Ridge isn't paradise, Mrs. Garrett. It's hard country full of hard people. You'll need to be harder still." "I will be," Caroline promised. "For Emma, I'll be whatever I need to be." Reese nodded slowly. "Then go, and don't look back. Nothing good ever comes from looking back." Caroline wanted to say something more, something that could capture the impossible gift this broken man had given them. But words felt too small, too inadequate. So instead she just met his eyes one last time, hoping he could see the gratitude and grief and fierce determination blazing there. Then she spurred the bay forward, Emma beside her on Dove, and they rode into the darkness with their whole lives packed behind them and an uncertain future somewhere ahead. Caroline didn't look back, but Emma did just once, and she saw Reese standing alone in the moonlight, watching them disappear like a man watching his second chance ride away into the night. They rode hard for the first few miles, putting distance between themselves and everything familiar. The landscape rolled past in shades of gray and black, scrub brush and rocky outcroppings and the occasional twisted tree clawing at the sky. Caroline's mind raced faster than the horses' hooves. 20 miles to the creek, then west, then north. 80 miles total. 3 days if they pushed hard, 4 if they didn't. And behind them, somewhere in the darkness, Dalton's men would be coming. "Mama," Emma said after an hour of riding, "do you think he'll be all right, Mr. Reese?" Caroline thought about the look in his eyes, the weight of old grief and fresh choice. "I don't know, baby, but I think maybe he gave himself something tonight, a reason to believe he's still human." "He saved us," Emma said simply. "He did," Caroline agreed. "And now we have to make sure his choice meant something. We survive, Emma. We survive and we build something new, and we never forget that we're worth saving." They rode on through the night, 2 figures on horseback cutting through the wilderness like hope outrunning despair. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal, while below them the land stretched vast and unforgiving. But Caroline felt something she hadn't felt in months: possibility. The future was uncertain, maybe even dangerous, but it was theirs. Nobody had bought it or claimed it or stolen it away. Dawn found them at the creek Reese had marked on the map. The water ran cold and clear over smooth stones, and both horses drank gratefully while Caroline and Emma splashed their faces and refilled the canteen. Emma pulled out Sarah's watch, turning it over in the growing light. The inscription on the back was worn but still readable: "To Sarah, who made me believe in tomorrow." "He loved her very much," Emma said quietly. "Yes," Caroline said, "and now he's given us his tomorrow. We can't waste it." They followed the creek west as the sun climbed higher, painting the world in shades of gold and copper. The landscape was changing, growing more rugged, more wild. Pine trees began to appear, scattered at first then clustering into small groves. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, full of possibility instead of dust and defeat. By midday they'd reached the point where the map showed them cutting back north. Caroline called a halt to rest the horses and eat a quick meal of bread and dried meat. Emma sat on a flat rock, watching the water flow past, her fingers absently turning Sarah's watch over and over. "Do you think Papa's out there somewhere?" Emma asked suddenly. "Do you think he knows we're running?" Caroline's jaw tightened. "Your father made his choices. We're making ours." "I know, but—" Emma trailed off, looking young and lost. "I keep wondering if maybe he didn't mean to abandon us. Maybe something happened to him." "Maybe," Caroline allowed, though she didn't believe it. Thomas had always been good at running when things got hard. But either way, it doesn't change what we have to do. We keep moving. We stay alive. We find our own way. Emma nodded, tucking the watch carefully into her pocket. "I'm scared, Mama." "Me too, baby," Caroline admitted. "But we're scared together, and that makes us stronger than either of us would be alone." They remounted and turned north, following a narrow trail that wound between stands of pine and over rocky ground. The horses picked their way carefully, sure-footed despite the rough terrain. Caroline kept checking behind them, watching for any sign of pursuit, but saw only empty landscape rolling away toward the horizon. As the afternoon wore on, Emma began to sing softly, an old song Caroline's mother used to hum, something about rivers and home and journeys without end. The sound drifted through the trees, fragile and defiant at once, and Caroline felt tears prick her eyes. Her daughter was so brave, so impossibly, beautifully brave. Whatever happened next, whatever trials waited in Redemption Ridge or beyond, Caroline swore she would do everything in her power to make sure Emma kept that brightness, that unbroken spirit that could still find songs even in the wilderness. Night fell again and they made cold camp in a sheltered hollow between 3 large boulders. No fire, too risky, too visible. They ate more dried meat and passed the canteen back and forth, then huddled together under blankets with the horses standing guard nearby. Emma fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from a day in the saddle. But Caroline lay awake, staring up at the stars and thinking about Reese. Was he already facing Dalton's wrath? Was he hurt, hunted, broken further than he'd already been? Or had he found some way to disappear, to slip away into the wilderness and start over somewhere new? She'd never know. Their paths had crossed for one desperate night, and now they'd diverged forever. But she'd carry him with her, the memory of a man who'd chosen mercy when the world told him to choose cruelty. The second day brought rain, cold and relentless, turning the trail into slick mud that sucked at the horses' hooves. Caroline pulled her shawl over her head, but water found its way through every gap, soaking her dress until it clung heavy and miserable against her skin. Emma hunched forward on Dove, trying to shield herself, but there was no real shelter out here, just endless sky dumping its burden on two riders who couldn't afford to stop. They pushed through it anyway, because stopping meant thinking too much about the cold, about the miles still ahead, about the men who might be gaining ground behind them. The map in Caroline's pocket had turned to pulp despite her best efforts to keep it dry, but she'd memorized the route well enough. North, always north, with the mountains growing closer on the western horizon like jagged teeth waiting to bite. By afternoon, the rain had softened to a drizzle, and Emma's teeth had started chattering so hard Caroline could hear them over the horses' footfalls. They needed shelter, needed to get dry before the cold worked its way deeper. Caroline scanned the landscape desperately and spotted something promising, a rocky overhang jutting out from a hillside, deep enough to provide real cover. "There," she said, pointing, "we'll stop." They guided the horses up the slope, and relief washed through Caroline when she saw the overhang was even better than she'd hoped, almost a shallow cave, with enough space for both them and the animals. The ground inside was dry, carpeted with old pine needles that would make decent bedding. Emma slid off Dove and immediately started shaking, her lips tinged blue. "Off with those wet clothes," Caroline ordered, already stripping out of her own soaked dress. "Everything. We'll wrap in the blankets until things dry." They worked quickly, hanging wet garments over rocks and branches, then huddling together under the blankets with their bodies pressed close for warmth. The horses stood at the overhang's entrance, occasionally shaking water from their manes. Caroline rubbed Emma's arms and back, trying to work heat back into her daughter's skin. "Better?" she asked after a while. Emma nodded, though she was still trembling. "How much farther?" Caroline tried to calculate in her head. They'd covered maybe 40 miles in a day and a half, which meant another 40 to go. 2 more days if the weather cleared, 3 if it didn't. "Halfway," she said. "We're halfway there, baby." "Feels like forever," Emma whispered. "I know," Caroline pulled her closer. "But think about what comes after, a new place, a fresh start. No debts, no fear, no looking over our shoulders waiting for." She stopped abruptly. Both horses had gone still, ears pricked forward, staring at something down the slope. Caroline's hand went instinctively to her knife, heart hammering. Had Dalton's men found them already? Had Reese given them up after all? Then she saw what had caught the horse's attention. A figure trudging up the hill, hunched against the drizzle, leading a limping mule. Not Dalton's men. Just a traveler, old and weathered, with a pack on his back and defeat in every line of his body. The old man spotted them and stopped, raising one hand in a gesture that was half greeting, half surrender. "Easy there," he called, his voice rough as gravel. "Don't mean no harm. Just saw your horses and thought maybe we could share the shelter till this passes." Caroline hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to trust strangers, not now, not when so much was at stake. But the old man looked about as threatening as a scarecrow, and there was something in his tired eyes that reminded her uncomfortably of herself, someone just trying to survive. "All right," she said finally, "but keep your distance." The old man nodded gratefully and led his mule up under the overhang. He settled against the opposite wall, far enough away to be respectful but close enough to benefit from the shelter. His mule stood next to the horses, head hanging low with exhaustion. "Name's Walter," the old man offered after a moment. "Walter Pine. Been prospecting up near Eagle's Nest, but the claim played out. Heading back to civilization, or what passes for it these days." "Caroline," she said, offering no last name. "And this is Emma." Walter nodded, seeming to understand the need for caution. He pulled out a small pouch and began rolling a cigarette with stiff, gnarled fingers. "Rough country to be traveling with a young one," he observed, "especially with weather like this." "We manage," Caroline said shortly. "Sure, sure." Walter lit his cigarette, the flame from his match briefly illuminating a face carved deep with years and hardship. "Didn't mean nothing by it, just making conversation." He took a drag, then added casually, "Noticed you got 2 good horses there. That bay's got quality breeding. Not the kind of animal folks usually have unless they got money or stole him." Caroline's grip tightened on her knife. "The bay was a gift." "Must have been some gift," Walter said, but there was no accusation in his tone, just weary observation. "Times being what they are, not many folks give away horses like that." Emma stirred under the blankets. "A man gave us his horses so we could escape," she said suddenly, before Caroline could stop her. "He was supposed to take me to a bad place, but he let us go instead." "Emma," Caroline warned. But Walter was nodding slowly, like the story made perfect sense. "Outlaw with a conscience, huh? Don't see many of those these days. Most men in that line of work, they forget how to be anything else." He took another drag. "You're lucky, real lucky." "We know," Caroline said stiffly. Walter was quiet for a moment, studying them through the smoke. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a cloth bundle. "Got some jerky here. Rabbit mostly. You're welcome to share if you got something to trade." Caroline wanted to refuse out of pure suspicion, but Emma's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. They'd been rationing their food carefully, but 2 days of hard riding had left them both hollow with hunger. "We've got cornmeal," she offered reluctantly, "and some coffee." "Coffee?" Walter said reverently. "Now that's a treasure worth more than gold out here." They made the trade, and Walter produced a small pot that he set outside to catch rainwater. When it was full enough, he mixed in the coffee grounds and set it on a few rocks he'd arranged with practiced efficiency. The smell as it heated was almost painful in its familiarity, the scent of normal mornings, of life before everything fell apart. They ate in silence, the jerky tough but nourishing, the coffee bitter and perfect. Emma warmed her hands around the tin cup Walter had shared, color finally returning to her cheeks. Caroline watched the old prospector carefully, but he seemed content just to eat and smoke, asking no more questions, making no threatening moves. "Where you headed?" Walter asked eventually, "if you don't mind my asking." Caroline hesitated, but something about the man's tired honesty made her answer. "North, town called Redemption Ridge." Walter's eyebrows rose. "Redemption Ridge, that's hard country, rough folk, not many women make it there alone." "We're not alone," Emma said firmly. "We have each other." Walter smiled at that, the expression softening his weathered face. "That you do, little miss, that you do." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Redemption Ridge is about 40 miles from here, maybe 45. There's a trading post about 20 miles north, place called Harker's Station. Man who runs it is mean as a snake, but he's honest after his fashion. You need supplies, that's where you'll find them." "We don't have money for supplies," Caroline admitted. Walter glanced at Sarah's watch, which Emma had pulled out to check the time. The silver gleamed even in the gray light. "You got that," he said carefully. "That fetch enough for food, ammunition, whatever you need." Emma's hand closed protectively over the watch. "I can't sell this." "Might have to if things get desperate," Walter said gently. "Sentiment's a luxury out here, girl. Survival comes first." "It was a gift from someone who died," Emma said, her voice cracking. from someone who loved her more than anything. Walter's expression shifted, something like understanding crossing his face. "Then you hold on to it as long as you can," he said quietly. "But know when to let go if you have to. The dead don't need silver and memories. The living need food and shelter." They finished their meal as the rain tapered off to nothing. The clouds began to break, letting shafts of pale sunlight through. Walter stood and stretched, his joints popping audibly. Best be moving on, got ground to cover before dark. He packed up his few belongings, loaded his mule, then paused before leaving. "Piece of advice if you'll take it. When you get to Harker's station, don't tell them you're running from anything. Harker's got friends in low places and information's worth money to men like him. Just say you're heading north to join family. Keep it simple." "Why are you helping us?" Caroline asked suddenly. Walter was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the clearing sky. "Had a daughter once," he said finally. "About your age, Emma. Fever took her when she was 16. Sometimes I think about what her life might have been if she'd lived, who she might have become." He looked back at them and his eyes were bright with old grief. "Maybe you're her in some other life. Maybe this is me getting a chance to do right by her again." He tipped his hat and started down the slope, his mule following obediently. Caroline and Emma watched him go, this stranger who'd shared his food and his story and asked nothing in return. When he disappeared into the trees, Emma turned to her mother. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked quietly. "Really make it?" Caroline pulled her daughter close. "We have to," she said, "because the alternative is going back, and we both know that's not an option." They waited until their clothes had dried enough to wear, then packed up and mounted the horses. The ground was still muddy, but the sun was out now, warming their backs as they continued north. The miles passed slowly, marked by the rhythm of hoofbeats and the creak of leather and the occasional bird call from the surrounding pines. As dusk approached on their second night, they spotted smoke rising in the distance. Caroline's first instinct was to avoid it, but then she remembered Walter's words about Harker's station. They were low on supplies, and another day of hard riding still lay ahead. Maybe they could trade something small for food, a blanket perhaps, or one of their extra water skins. They found the trading post as darkness fell, a ramshackle building made of rough-hewn logs with a sagging porch and windows glowing with lamplight. A hand-painted sign over the door read HARKERS in faded letters. Several horses were tied outside, and Caroline could hear voices and laughter from within. "Stay close," she told Emma as they dismounted. They tied their horses to the rail and stepped inside. The trading post was crowded and close, smelling of tobacco smoke and unwashed bodies, and something cooking that made Caroline's stomach clench with hunger. Men sat at rough tables playing cards and drinking, while others browsed the shelves stocked with supplies. Behind a long counter stood a man Caroline assumed was Harker, tall and rail-thin with a sharp face and sharper eyes that immediately locked onto the newcomers. "Help you?" he asked, his tone neither welcoming nor hostile. "Need some supplies," Caroline said, pitching her voice low and steady. "Food mostly, maybe ammunition." Harker's gaze swept over them, calculating. "You got money?" "We can trade." "Trade what?" Harker leaned forward, elbows on the counter. "Don't look like you got much worth trading." Caroline pulled out one of their extra water skins, setting it on the counter. "Good leather, well made, worth something." Harker picked it up, examined it with practiced efficiency, then tossed it back. "Worth about 3 pounds of flour and some salt. That's it." It was robbery and they both knew it, but Caroline nodded. "Fine." As Harker measured out the supplies, Emma wandered toward the shelves, looking at the goods on display. Caroline was about to call her back when a man at one of the tables stood abruptly, chair scraping loud against the wooden floor. "Well now," the man said, his voice carrying across the room, "what do we have here?" Caroline's blood went cold. The man was big, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down one cheek and eyes like chips of ice. and he was staring at Emma with an expression that made Caroline's skin crawl. "Just passing through," Caroline said quickly, moving to put herself between the man and her daughter. The man grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "Passing through to where? Pretty young thing like that traveling with just her ma. That's unusual." "None of your business," Caroline said flatly. The man's grin widened. "Everything that happens in Harker's station is my business, lady. Name's Cobb. I work for Mr. Dalton down south, and I'm wondering if maybe you're the two runaways we've been looking for." The room had gone quiet. Every eye was on them now. Caroline's hand drifted toward her knife, but she knew it was useless. Cobb had at least 3 men with him, all armed, all watching with predatory interest. "Don't know what you're talking about," Caroline said, heart hammering. "We're heading north to join family." "That's so?" Cobb stepped closer. "Then you won't mind if I take a look at that bay you got tied outside, because I'm betting that's Reese's horse. And if Reese gave you his horse, that means he let you go, which means he betrayed Mr. Dalton, which means you two are worth a lot of money to the man who brings you back." Emma had gone pale, backing up until she hit the shelves. Caroline's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out, but they were trapped. The door was behind Cobb and his men. The windows were too small to climb through, and even if they could reach the horses, they'd be shot down before they made it 10 feet. "Please," Caroline said, hating the tremor in her voice. "Just let us go. We haven't done anything wrong." "Wrong?" Cobb laughed. "Lady, you cost Mr. Dalton $300. That's plenty wrong." He gestured to his men. "Grab them." Then from the doorway, a voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the night, was Reese. Reese looked like hell. His coat was torn, dried blood crusted one side of his face, and he held himself like a man with broken ribs who refused to acknowledge them. But his gun was drawn and steady, pointed directly at Cobb's chest, and his eyes held the kind of cold fury that made even hard men reconsider their choices. "Reese," Cobb said, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something uglier. "Heard Dalton was looking for you. Heard you let his property walk away." "That's right," Reese said, stepping fully into the room. "And now I'm here to make sure they keep walking." Cobb's hand drifted toward his gun. "You're outnumbered, 4-1. Even you can't beat those odds." "Maybe not," Reese agreed. "But I can definitely shoot you before your boys shoot me. Question is, are you willing to die for Dalton's $300? The room held its breath. Caroline could see the calculation happening behind Cobb's eyes, weighing profit against survival, pride against pain. His men had tensed, hands hovering over their weapons, waiting for the signal to draw. One word from Cobb and this place would become a slaughterhouse. Then Harker spoke up from behind the counter, his voice cutting through the tension. "No shooting in my establishment," he said flatly. "You want to kill each other, take it outside. I just got the bloodstains out from last month." Cobb's jaw tightened. "Stay out of this, Harker." "Can't," Harker replied. "My station, my rules. And my rule is simple: anybody starts shooting inside, I finish them with this." He lifted a shotgun from beneath the counter, pointing it vaguely in everyone's direction. "Now, seems to me you got a standoff. Reese wants the women, you want the women, but only one of you is willing to die for it." "I'll take those odds," Reese said quietly. Cobb studied him for a long moment, then slowly raised his hands away from his gun. "Fine, take them, but Dalton will hear about this. He'll come for you himself, and when he does—" "When he does, I'll deal with it," Reese interrupted. "Now step aside." Cobb moved, his men following his lead. Reese gestured with his gun toward Caroline and Emma. "Outside, now." Caroline grabbed Emma's hand and they rushed toward the door, keeping as much distance between themselves and Cobb's men as possible. Reese backed out after them, guns still trained on the room. Only when they were all on the porch did he lower his weapon slightly. "Get on your horses," he ordered. Ride north as fast as you can. Don't stop until dawn. What about you? Emma asked, her voice small. I'll buy you time, Reese said. Now go. No, Caroline said suddenly, surprising herself. You're coming with us. Reese shook his head. I can't, I slow you down, and besides. You're hurt, Caroline cut in, seeing how he favored his left side, how his breathing came shallow and careful. You can barely stand. You think you can fight off 4 men in your condition. Better me than you, Reese said. From inside the trading post, they could hear movement, angry voices conferring. They had maybe a minute before Cobb and his men came out ready for a real fight. Caroline made a decision born of desperation and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like caring. Emma, get on Dove, she ordered. Reese, you're riding the bay with me. I don't need. Yes, you do, Caroline said fiercely. You saved us twice now. Let us save you once. Reese looked at her, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition that their fates had somehow become tangled together. Then he nodded once and stumbled toward the bay. Caroline helped him mount, then swung up behind him, her arms circling his waist to hold him steady. She could feel him trembling with pain and exhaustion. Hold on, she said, and spurred the horse forward. They rode hard into the darkness, Emma on Dove keeping pace beside them, the sound of angry shouting fading behind them. Caroline expected gunshots, expected pursuit, but neither came. Maybe Harker had made good on his threat to end anyone who started trouble. Maybe Cobb had decided they weren't worth the risk. Either way, the trading post disappeared behind them and the night swallowed them whole. They rode for hours, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. Reese slumped forward in the saddle, barely conscious, his weight heavy against Caroline. She held him tight, one hand gripping the reins while the other pressed against his side where she could feel the sticky warmth of blood seeping through his shirt. Stay with me, she murmured, just a little farther. Finally, when the horses were stumbling with exhaustion and Emma was swaying dangerously in her saddle, Caroline called a halt. They'd reached a dense stand of pines that offered some cover. She eased Reese down from the bay, struggling under his weight, then helped him lean against a tree trunk while Emma tended to the horses. Let me see, Caroline said, kneeling beside him. Reese tried to wave her off, but he was too weak to stop her from unbuttoning his coat and shirt. What she found made her stomach turn. His ribs were a mass of bruises, purple and black and spreading. Worse, there was a knife wound in his side, not deep enough to be fatal, but ugly and infected, the edges red and angry. Dalton did this, she asked quietly. Reese's laugh came out as a wheeze. Dalton's man, before I left, wanted to make sure I remembered who I belonged to. You don't belong to anyone, Caroline said fiercely. She pulled out their water skin and what remained of her petticoat, tearing strips of fabric for bandages. Emma, bring me the whiskey from Reese's saddlebag. There's no, Reese started, then stopped when Emma produced a small flask. Smart girl. Caroline cleaned the wound as gently as she could, though Reese still hissed in pain. The whiskey would help prevent infection, but he needed real medical attention, needed rest and proper medicine that they didn't have. She bound his ribs as best she could, wrapping the makeshift bandages tight to support the broken bones. Why did you come back? She asked as she worked. You got away clean, you could have disappeared. Reese was quiet for so long she thought he might have passed out. Then, softly, couldn't. Couldn't why? Couldn't let it end that way, he said, his voice rough. Spent 6 years telling myself I was just surviving, that nothing else mattered. Then you two came along and reminded me that surviving isn't the same as living. I gave you a chance to run, but I didn't give myself one. Not really. He paused, breath hitching. Figured if I was going down anyway, might as well go down trying to be the man Sarah thought I was. Caroline tied off the bandage and sat back on her heels. You're not going down. We won't let you. Reese's eyes had drifted closed. Might not be up to you. Then rest, Caroline said firmly. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." They made cold camp again, huddled together for warmth with Reese propped against the tree. Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted beyond measure, but Caroline stayed awake watching Reese breathe. Each breath sounded labored, painful. She'd seen enough sickness and injury on the farm to know infection when she saw it. Without proper treatment, that wound would only get worse. Dawn came gray and cold. Reese was feverish, his skin hot to the touch, muttering words Caroline couldn't quite make out, Sarah's name mostly, mixed with fragments of sentences that didn't connect. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead and cursed under her breath. "Mama," Emma stirred, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She saw Reese and went pale. "Is he?" "He's alive," Caroline said, "but he needs medicine, real medicine." "Where are we going to get that?" Emma asked helplessly. "We're in the middle of nowhere." Caroline pulled out the ruined map, trying to orient herself. "Walter said there was a trading post 20 miles north, Harker's Station, but we can't go back there. We need something closer." Emma chewed her lip, thinking, "What about Redemption Ridge? How far is that?" "At least 30 miles, Caroline said. "Maybe more, too far with Reese like this." They sat in silence, the impossibility of their situation settling over them like a shroud. 3 people, 2 horses, and miles of wilderness between them and any kind of help. Reese needed medicine they didn't have. Emma was exhausted to the bone, and Caroline was running out of solutions faster than she was running out of hope. Then Emma pulled out Sarah's watch, the silver gleaming in the weak morning light. She stared at it for a long moment, then held it out to Caroline. "We have to sell it." "Emma, no." "Yes," Emma said firmly. "Mr. Reese gave us this so we could survive. Well, now we need it to help him survive. It's what Mrs. Sarah would have wanted." Caroline looked at her daughter, 14 years old and already understanding sacrifice in ways no child should have to. She took the watch carefully, feeling the weight of it, the history it carried. Then she nodded. "All right, but we need to find somewhere to sell it first." "There," Emma said suddenly, pointing west. "Smoke, maybe a homestead." Caroline followed her gaze and saw it. A thin column of smoke rising above the trees, maybe 2 miles away. It could be nothing. It could be danger. But it could also be their only chance. "Help me get him on the horse," Caroline said. Together they managed to get Reese mounted, though he barely seemed aware of what was happening. Caroline climbed up behind him again, holding him steady, while Emma took the lead on Dove. They rode toward the smoke, Caroline praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore, that whoever they found would be willing to help rather than hurt. The homestead appeared through the trees, a small cabin with a barn and a chicken coop, surrounded by a split-rail fence. Clothes hung on a line, snapping in the morning breeze. A woman stood in the yard hanging more washing, a child playing at her feet. When she saw the riders approaching, she snatched up the child and reached for something leaning against the cabin wall, a rifle. "That's far enough," the woman called out, raising the gun. "State your business." Caroline raised one hand in peace, the other still holding Reese upright. "Please, we need help. This man is hurt. He has a fever. I can pay. We have silver." The woman studied them warily, rifle still raised. She was younger than Caroline had first thought, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and tired eyes that had seen too much. The child, a boy, perhaps 3 years old, clung to her skirts. "What happened to him?" the woman asked. "Knife wound," Caroline said honestly. "It's infected. He'll die without medicine." The woman's expression didn't soften, but Caroline saw something shift behind her eyes, calculation giving way to something like reluctant compassion. "I'm not a doctor." "But you have supplies," Caroline pressed. "Whiskey, clean bandages, maybe something for fever. I'll pay whatever you ask." The woman hesitated, then slowly lowered the rifle. "Get him inside, quick. Don't want the neighbors seeing." They dismounted and half-carried Reese into the cabin. It was small but clean, with a table, a bed, and a stone fireplace where a pot of something was simmering. The woman directed them to put Reese on the bed, then shooed her child toward a corner with a wooden toy. "Stay there, Samuel," she ordered, then turned to Caroline. "Let me see." Caroline unwrapped the bandages, revealing the angry wound. The woman made a soft sound of disapproval. "That's bad, should have been stitched when it was fresh." "Now," she shook her head, "I'll do what I can, but I'm making no promises." "Thank you," Caroline breathed. The woman moved with efficient purpose, gathering supplies from a wooden chest, clean cloth, a needle and thread, a bottle of clear liquid that smelled like pure fire. "Hold him down," she instructed. "This is going to hurt." It did. Even in his fever-addled state, Reese screamed when the woman cleaned out the wound, his body arching against Caroline and Emma's grip. The woman worked quickly, stitching the wound closed with small, neat stitches, then wrapping it in clean bandages. When she finished, Reese had passed out completely, his breathing shallow but steady. "Best I can do," the woman said, wiping blood from her hands. "Fever should break in a day or two if the infection doesn't spread. If it does." She didn't finish the sentence. Caroline pulled out Sarah's watch, holding it up. "This is solid silver. It's worth at least $50, maybe more. It's yours." The woman stared at the watch, and for the first time something like emotion crossed her face. "That's too much." "It's not," Caroline said firmly. "You saved his life. That's worth more than silver." The woman took the watch slowly, turning it over to read the inscription. Her lips moved silently as she read the words, and when she looked up her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "My husband's name was Thomas," she said quietly. "He used to say things like that about tomorrow, about believing, before the war took him." She closed her fingers around the watch. "You can stay until he's well enough to travel, but then you need to go. I can't afford trouble, and you three look like trouble incarnate." "We are," Emma said softly, "but we're trying not to be." The woman, she'd introduced herself as Margaret, smiled faintly at that. "Aren't we all, child? Aren't we all?" They stayed 3 days. 3 days of Margaret changing Reese's bandages and forcing bitter tea down his throat while the fever raged. 3 days of Caroline and Emma helping with chores, feeding chickens, hauling water, mending fences, trying to repay Margaret's kindness in whatever small ways they could. 3 days of waiting and hoping and watching Reese fight for his life in a stranger's bed. On the morning of the 4th day, Reese opened his eyes. Really opened them, not the fever-glazed stare of the past few days, but clear and aware. He looked around the unfamiliar cabin, confusion crossing his face, then found Caroline sitting in a chair beside the bed. Where he started, his voice raspy. "Safe," Caroline said quickly. "We're safe. You're going to be okay." Reese tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "The watch." "Gone," Caroline admitted. "We sold it to pay for your care," Emma insisted. Something complicated passed over Reese's face, grief, gratitude, guilt, all tangled together. She shouldn't have. That was Sarah's. "And Sarah would have wanted it used to save a life," Caroline interrupted firmly. "You gave us everything to save Emma. She gave the watch to save you. That's what families do." "We're not," Reese started but stopped. "Because maybe they were. Not by blood or law, but by choice and circumstance and the strange bonds forged in desperation. A broken outlaw, a desperate mother, and a brave girl who'd learned too young that survival meant sacrifice." "Rest," Caroline said gently. "We'll talk about what comes next when you're stronger." Reese nodded slowly, his eyes already drifting closed again. But before he slept, he caught Caroline's hand. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not leaving me behind." Caroline squeezed his hand. "Never," she promised. "We're in this together now, all the way to Redemption Ridge."